Bienvenidos a un nuevo Facebook Live aquí en Descentralizados, en el Blockchain Summit Latam 2018. Estamos con Leo Salgado y con Chris Burniske de Partner de Placeholder. Vamos a tener una entretenida conversación, pero en inglés. Así que de ya cambien el switch para escuchar, porque de verdad Chris tiene mucho que contarnos, especialista sobre todo en el tema semántico, tiene unas explicaciones muy claras sobre la blockchain. Así que Chris, nice to have you here.
Thank you
Welcome.
for having me.
As we were talking before, a good point of start to talking about blockchain will be like the separation between public and private blockchain.
Sure.
Can you talk to us about that?
Certainly. So this is all a technology space, right? And you can think of blockchains as creating networks. And those networks can be public, or those networks can be private. And a lot of the use cases we see with the private networks come from enterprises or the banks or companies where they need to create a walled garden. And it's kind of like there's a bouncer at the door who won't let people in.
Like Hyperledger would be an example of
Hyperledger is a software, an open source software that can be implemented in a public setting or a private setting.
Oh, okay.
And so it's really, you can take these softwares, for example, Ethereum, right? Ethereum is a software that runs in a public network. That's what we think of as Ethereum. But then there's the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, which allows for Ethereum to also be launched as a private network. I think that the important thing with this is open always wins over closed. Right? And if we think of sort of the history of information technology, there were lots of instances where the incumbents, the entering enterprises, wanted to create a closed network, right? You think of AOL, for example,
Yeah.
or MSN. Microsoft wanted to own the internet as a company. But the internet, these public networks grow much faster. And they attract more talent. More people build on open networks. Open networks tend to be better for the world, and so open networks tend to win over time, even though a lot of enterprises or incumbents will try to convince you otherwise.
I really want to believe that, and I think I do. I believe that. I will put my mindset into that. Like, the good ones will always win.
Yeah, and the history of information technology has shown that play out time and again. I think that closed networks they can still provide what I call better, faster, cheaper solutions, similar to what software as a service does, right, where it makes some things more efficient, but it's not as disruptive, and it keeps the closed networks, by and large, try and keep the existing powers intact, as opposed to exploding those powers and opening up the networks to the broader world.
Nice.
So how these blockchains, private networks became in assets and in cryptocurrencies and the application of this?
Sure. So the private networks, by and large, they're just a software that's maintained by a company or a group of companies. And so that is similar to any enterprise running a software that provides better service. The open networks, they're not companies, right? They have a native asset that actually incentivizes that whole economy to provide the good or service. And so in the case of Bitcoin, the Bitcoin network, it uses a native asset called Bitcoin to incentivize the computers to clear and settle Bitcoin transactions. Or Ethereum has the native asset Ether to do a similar thing. Yeah. And there's thousands of these assets now. And the reason you need the asset is the coordinating force that brings that public network together and holds that network together. And we have cryptocurrencies, we have crypto commodities, we have crypto tokens. These are things I've written about in my book, and it's just important for people to understand the diversity of assets and open networks that are out there today.
A lot of people think that every currency have a developers team, and a lot of people are thinking that of these the developers team like companies that are behind of this, and how can we clarify this more than actually they are a group of people that maintain the network?
Sure.
How can you
Yeah.
explain that?
And there is confusion, and there are even companies that support public networks, right? So it's a messy space. I think the cleanest way to think about it is a company has a business model, and that business model requires a company to extract profit from the service that they provide. A true crypto network doesn't have a business model within the protocol. It has an incentive model that basically circulates this asset amongst all of the actors, the supply side and demand side, to incentivize them all to use the network. Now, within that public network, which has an incentive model, companies can build on top of it, just as companies can build on top of TCP/IP, the backbone of the internet, and extract profit. But the key is that the core system doesn't have a motive for profit. It's just an incentive system that creates an economy that provides this service.
Yeah, it validates an ecosystem.
Yes.
So you can find after that every aspect of this ecosystem, like profitable, not profitable, everything is supported by that. What other concept do you think it's complex to explain and the people should know more about it related to blockchain?
Well,
of course.
I think that just one general idea that people get mixed up with is, why do we need so many currencies, right?
Yeah.
Why do we have all of these currencies? And that's where I think it's important to realize they're not all currencies. They're native assets to these networks, and these networks provide all different kinds of goods and services. Certainly some of them are a currency like Bitcoin or Litecoin or Decred or Monero, but then when you get into like Ethereum or Filecoin or LivePeer or Orchid, those are more commodities. Or you have consumer-facing things like Steam, which is really a consumer-facing good or service. It's not a currency, it's not a commodity. It's more like when I go to Reddit or Medium and use those consumer-facing services, it's that now there's a native asset to incentivize that activity, which replaces advertising, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know of that many people that enjoy advertising.
No, not much. Certainly not. Well, it changed also the perception about the ownership of the data.
Certainly, yeah. Everyone who contributes the data to the network, that's the network's data. And so that's very important, because when you think about Facebook or Amazon or Google or Apple, a lot of those companies, their native business model is based on proprietary data. And it's either providing a proprietary service based on proprietary data, or charging directly for access to that data. What blockchains do is they're open data layers, right? So you actually crush the incumbent business model, you commoditize that model, which then allows all kinds of innovation to happen on top of those data layers.
So the possible change that the blockchain can produce is not only in this financial world, other stuff. It could change impact like social relations,
Certainly.
changing that areas.
Certainly. I mean, I really think of these as economic systems, and economic systems impact all parts of our lives, and so that's where you start to see applications of crypto networks within all these different verticals. That's what's hard about it, but that's also what's exciting about it.
Nice. What do you think are the hardest challenge that the massification, the expansion of blockchain is facing right now?
Well, and so right now, I focus within the open network, so I'll speak about those challenges. Certainly in the US, it's a regulatory one,
of course,
and much of the world is watching the US to see what the US does.
That is, the regulatory system of the US is completely different from the European Union and a lot of other countries. It's like, there's more like a standardized system and the US.
Yeah, there are definitely all of these different systems, and everyone's trying to figure out what to do, right? So regulatory is one. I think another is just basic security for people who use these assets, right? There's still a lot of phishing attacks. There's a lot of different attacks that fool people who are new to the ecosystem.
The things that you were talking yesterday with the guys from Hacktrick.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the attacks on the not on the blockchain, but in the surrounding parts of the blockchain.
Exactly. So beefing up that security and those best practices, and then I think also just making these things fun and easy to use. Consumers will only adopt something.
Gamification.
Well, gamification, but just I want to use this network. You know, this is providing a service that I can't find anywhere else. And so just as people started using Facebook or started using Twitter or started using Medium because it added value to their lives, we need to find ways to add value to people's lives. Right now, it's still early enough that it's mostly all the crazy people that are just in love with the concept, right?
Guilty.
the early adopters, but that won't get the mainstream. The mainstream will be brought on board by loving the services that
Actually,
it provides.
when people make a transaction for the first time, when it's really exciting, when you see this transaction happening, and you see in the Ether scan on the blockchain explorer happening in real time, and you see there, and it's there. It's really it creates a feeling of reality of excitement when you are when you create your first transaction.
The magic becomes real.
But I believe that that's more for the developers, so the people that knows the back end, you know, like because you understand what was
actually when
happening.
You create a transaction, actually in the ATM, it gives you a link to the Etherscan so you can see actually what is happening in real time.
Some people get excited, largely developers. I think the key though is that the developers are excited. Right? And so the developers are coming, the developers are building, and you need the developers, right? You need the mind share of the developers to build everything that then the consumers will come and use.
In the user experience of products that involve blockchain, that's a huge challenge.
Huge challenge. And I think the best example out there right now would be Rise, which is from YouNow, and it's built on top of the Props platform. I think it's
Can
still
you talk more about the project?
It's a many-to-many video streaming, and it's built by YouNow, which built this protocol called Props, and Rise is the first application on top of that protocol. I think it's still in an early stage. It might be a private beta. But what's fascinating about it is it's many-to-many video, and so we could be streaming this on Rise right now. Audience members are watching, and then we can drag those audience members up into the screen with us. And so we can talk with them, and then audience members also tip the people that are on the screen, and so you accumulate props over time.
Sounds
so
great.
So it's a gamification of many-to-many video.
It sounds really great. Yeah, no, I think that kind of stuff is like the things that we need, really. Like
exactly.
These things that will help average people to fall in love with the blockchain.
And Decentraland's a good example too, right? Decentraland from South America, from Argentina. I know we're in Chile, but where they're providing a virtual reality where the land supply is controlled, similar to how Bitcoin's land supply is controlled. So it's decentralized control of digital land creation, which then allows people to build on top of that land and create virtual worlds. So that's another.
Bots and burn mana to create
whatever
stores, everything, whatever you want to put in.
Like Distritox or something similar?
No, that's different.
Different, but it's well.
This is more like Second Life. Second Life was a big virtual reality game in the 2000s, but while Second Life continues to exist today, it's centralized, right? So you can't commit your life to that because you're
giving your data, your info to someone else,
and that company can pull the cord at any time. So if you're really going to devote yourself to a virtual world, it makes sense that the control of that virtual world be owned by the community members.
Sounds nice, yeah.
We are learning a lot in this.
This interview. Yeah, in the summit, in the whole summit. And finally, don't take more time from you. What do you think about the summit? What's your feeling about the ecosystem in Chile? What is happening in Latam also?
Sure. I think the summit's great. I think that I've been impressed by how many people are here. Everything's been very professionally done. Really good roster of speakers. It's been fun to listen to things in Spanish. I speak gringo Spanish, so I understand maybe 50%, maybe less. Chilean accents are particularly hard.
It's
to
hard.
pass.
Argentina and Chilean or more Chilean?
Yeah.
More Chilean is the Chilean is harder than the Argentinian?
I think so, because there's all these like things
believe you. I believe
you know, like estamos listo, instead of, you cut the s's and all the
We shorten the
cachai
words,
and tipo and all the
Slang, a lot of slang. Yeah.
palta, like all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so, not that they're talking about that on stage, but it does make Chilean Spanish hard.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of people from abroad say that, and we have to acknowledge that the Chilean accent is very complicated.
It's your own identity.
Yeah, that's true. But you had a good time here.
Yeah,
That's
I've enjoyed it.
That's important, and we have a good time with you. And it's a great interview. Thank you for being here, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, Leo. You're not Leo. Leo. And thank you all. Muchas gracias por vernos en un nuevo Facebook Live aquí en Descentralizados. Y hasta la próxima aquí en directo desde el Blockchain Summit Latam 2018. Muchas gracias.
Done?